It feels like every other day there's some new diet-making headlines, right? But some ideas seem to stick around. And they stick around because maybe they're built on something a bit more substantial. Today, we're diving deep into one of those, an approach that's been gaining some serious scientific traction, the anti-inflammatory diet. At its heart, this isn't just about, what you eat. It's really about how those foods can actively reduce the chronic inflammation inside your body, that sort of silent underlying driver behind so many health conditions we see today. So, our mission in this deep dive, we want to unpack its origins, the benefits it offers, which seem pretty profound, and also, importantly, some potential drawbacks. We've distilled all this from the sources we looked at for you.
It's actually quite eye-opening how much chronic inflammation impacts us, often without us even realizing it. Think of it like a low-grade fire, sort of constantly smoldering inside. And understanding a dietary approach specifically designed to, well, put out that fire, that's incredibly crucial for your long-term health, your vitality. It's really becoming a foundational concept in preventative wellness these days.
Okay, foundational is a strong word. It makes me wonder, where did this whole idea even start? I mean, it wasn't always mainstream, was it?
Oh, not at all. I mean, the underlying principles, eating whole foods, that's ancient, right? But the concept of the anti-inflammatory diet as a distinct framework, that really emerged probably in the early 2000s. It was largely popularized by Dr. Andrew Weil. He's a real pioneer in what we now call integrative medicine.
Dr. Well, yeah, I definitely remember his name being huge in this area. How significant was his role, really, taking these ideas from, science labs to the public? I think I recall his book, Healthy Aging, maybe around 2005. That seemed to lay out a pretty clear framework.
Oh, his influence was immense. Absolutely. And Dr. Weil's work, it didn't just appear out of thin air. It really built on this growing body of scientific evidence, mostly from the 90s and early 2000s. Evidence that was firmly linking chronic inflammation to a whole host of serious conditions. Right. We're talking heart disease, type 2 diabetes, even things like Alzheimer's. What he did so well was synthesize that complex science into practical, actionable dietary advice.
So it wasn't just the new science then. Did this diet draw on older wisdom too, like
Okay.
traditional ways of eating that were maybe already doing something similar?
Absolutely. And that's actually what makes it feel so robust, I think. The
Yeah.
diet drew significant inspiration from, long-standing traditional eating patterns. The Mediterranean diet's the big one, obviously, but also certain traditional Asian diets. These are regions that historically just show much lower rates of chronic disease. So, yeah, in many ways, it's a modern interpretation of ancient wisdom, but it's rigorously backed by the emerging science.
That mix of tradition and modern science is really compelling. And speaking of the science, what exactly was happening research-wise back in the 90s? What gave this diet its scientific backbone? What were researchers actually finding?
Right. That's where it gets really interesting from a scientific perspective. Research into inflammation's precise role in chronic disease just exploded in the 1990s. It
Yeah.
really did. This was the era when scientists started identifying and understanding specific markers of systemic inflammation. Things like C-reactive protein or CRP. You can think of CRP as like a smoke detector in your blood. It indicates a generalized inflammatory response happening somewhere. Identifying it as a measurable marker was a game changer, because suddenly it spurred intense interest in, well, what dietary changes could actually lower these markers?
Ah, okay. So if you could measure the smoke, you could maybe try to put up the fire with food. That makes total sense.
Precisely. Yeah. And from there, the anti-inflammatory diet just kept evolving. It continuously incorporated newer findings from nutrition science. It started gaining traction, through endorsements from health professionals, media features. It really began hitting the mainstream. Actually, by 2024, its popularity has surged by something like 16%, which that really reflects this increased public awareness of just how impactful inflammation is on our overall health. Wow, a 16% jump is pretty significant in a relatively short time. First, people are paying attention. Okay, so with that history covered, let's get practical for our listeners. If someone wants to embrace this, what does an anti-inflammatory plate actually look like? What are the key things you're piling on, and what are you maybe holding back on? Well, at its core, it really emphasizes whole, nutrient-rich foods, foods that are believed to actively reduce inflammation. And at the same time, you're strategically limiting the foods known to, well, make it worse. It's about cultivating an environment in your body that's just less prone to these inflammatory responses.
Right. So if we're building this plate, where do we start? What are the absolute must-haves, the things we should really focus on getting more of?
Okay, top of the list, fruits and vegetables. No
Yeah.
surprise there, maybe. Think bright berries, vibrant leafy greens like spinach, kale, Cruciferous veggies like broccoli, they're just packed with antioxidants and phytonutrients. These are the natural compounds that give plants their colors, basically. And they act like your body's tiny cellular firefighters, putting out those chronic fires of inflammation.
Sure.
Then you've got healthy fats. This is key. The diet strongly emphasizes omega-3s. You find those in fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, but also plant sources like walnuts and flax seeds. And don't forget the monounsaturated fats from things like olive oil and avocados. Really good stuff.
Okay, so good fats are definitely in. What about things like grains and protein? Are there specific types we should be aiming for?
Yeah, for grains, it's all about whole grains. Things like quinoa, brown rice, oats. These give you complex carbs, lots of fiber, nutrients. And crucially, they don't cause those sharp blood sugar spikes that can actually trigger inflammation. And for lean proteins, the diet tends to lean heavily towards plant-based options, beans, lentils, that sort of thing, plus moderate amounts of lean animal proteins, especially fish and poultry.
It strikes me that spices, things like turmeric, have been used for centuries, almost remedially. Do they fit into this modern anti-inflammatory approach?
Oh, absolutely they do. Spices and herbs often contain really powerful anti-inflammatory compounds. Turmeric is the star, right? With its active compound curcumin, it's been studied extensively for its anti-inflammatory effects, but also ginger, garlic. They're highly encouraged for similar properties. They aren't just flavor, they're functional ingredients here.
Got it. Functional. Okay, so that's the load up on list. What about the things we need to maybe dial back or even try to avoid to keep inflammation in check?
Right, the limit list. This usually includes highly processed foods, refined sugars, trans fats, those are a big no-no. Also, excessive red meat and alcohol. These tend to be the culprits that can really contribute significantly to chronic inflammation in the body. But look, it's not usually about total deprivation. It's more about smart substitutions and, moderation.
It sounds like a pretty intuitive approach overall. Whole foods, less processed stuff.
Yeah.
Is there a broader philosophy, though, beyond just the specific ingredients?
Yeah, we connect this to the bigger picture. It really is about a holistic approach. It's not just individual foods in isolation. It encourages things like mindful eating, paying attention to balanced portions. The common macronutrient split often ends up around, say, 40-50% carbs, 30% fat, and 20-30% protein, really leaning into nutrient density. And beyond the food itself, there's also a strong emphasis on staying hydrated, drinking enough water, and maintaining a moderate caloric intake overall. It's meant to be a comprehensive framework for, sustained wellness. A gentle nudge towards a healthier way of living, maybe.
That makes perfect sense. It's not just a list of rules. It's more of a lifestyle shift. Okay, now for the really exciting part. What can you genuinely expect if you adopt this way of eating? What are the ripple effects through your body?
Well, there are several pretty significant advantages that consistently show up in the research, and they're quite compelling. First, and maybe most importantly, is a reduced risk of chronic diseases. This is huge. Chronic inflammation is just such a key driver for conditions like cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, even certain cancers. The diet's focus on omega-3s and antioxidants can actively lower those inflammatory markers we talked about, like CRP. In fact, there was a 2018 study, I think, in the Journal of Nutrition that found following an anti-inflammatory eating pattern was associated with about a 20% lower risk of heart disease. That's a pretty significant return on investment for what's on your plate, right?
20% lower risk. Wow, that's a massive potential impact just from dietary choices. What about brain health? I know inflammation often gets linked to cognitive issues as we age.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that leads nicely into the second major benefit, improved cognitive health. Inflammation is definitely implicated in cognitive decline and neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. So the antioxidant-rich foods in this diet, again, think berries, leafy greens, they can help protect brain cells from oxidative stress. That's like cellular rust, essentially. There was a 2020 study in neurology that suggested diets high in these anti-inflammatory foods were associated with slower cognitive decline in older adults. It's not just what the foods add. It's also about removing those inflammatory triggers that can silently erode cognitive function over years. So this diet, it's not just a boost, it's kind of a defensive strategy for your brain too.
That's incredibly promising. And gut health's such a huge topic these days. How does this diet play into that whole intricate ecosystem inside us?
Right, for better gut health, the high fiber content is paramount. You get that from the fruits, the vegetables, the whole grains. Fiber basically feeds your healthy gut microbiome, that diverse community of beneficial bacteria living in your gut. And that microbiome is critical for everything from digestion to immunity. A thriving microbiome directly helps regulate inflammation throughout your entire body. Plus, fermented foods like yogurt or kefir, which often fit into this pattern, can further enhance gut health and potentially ease symptoms of things like IBS or bloating for some people.
Makes sense. And for many people, weight management is a big reason they look at changing their diet. Does this approach offer a sustainable path there?
It definitely can contribute. For weight management, the focus on nutrient-dense, often lower-calorie whole foods naturally supports achieving or maintaining a healthy weight.
Yeah.
Plus, the fiber and the healthy fats promote satiety, that feeling of fullness. That helps reduce overeating because you just feel satisfied for longer. A 2021 meta-analysis, I believe in the journal Nutrients, found that anti-inflammatory diets were associated with modest weight loss in overweight individuals. So it's not usually positioned as a quick fix weight loss diet, but more as a foundation for long-term healthy weight.
Okay, so not a crash diet, but a sustainable way to manage weight. What about joint pain? I know so many people struggle with that.
Absolutely, that's another key area. For enhanced joint health, reducing that systemic inflammation can significantly alleviate joint pain and stiffness. This is especially true for people with conditions like arthritis or other autoimmune issues where inflammation is a major factor. Omega-3s and turmeric, for instance, have shown real promise in reducing symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis. There was a 2017 study on this in Arthritis Research and Therapy. Imagine just moving with less discomfort simply by shifting what you eat. That's pretty powerful.
That would be a huge relief for so many. And finally, what about energy and mood? Does diet play a role there beyond just avoiding, sugar crashes?
It certainly seems to. You can often see improved energy and mood. The stable blood sugar levels you get from whole grains and balanced meals help prevent those energy slumps that leave you reaching for another coffee by 3 p.m. And furthermore, some studies are suggesting that reducing inflammation might potentially lower the risk of depression. There seems to be an emerging link between inflammation and mood disorders. So, yeah, it's not just physical benefits, it touches on mental well-being too. But, with all these potential positives, it almost sounds too good to be true sometimes. This raises an important question. Are there any hidden complexities, potential downsides people might overlook?
That's a really crucial question to ask. No dietary approach is perfect for everyone, right? It's important we look at the full picture. So what are the potential drawbacks here that listeners should maybe be aware of?
Well, first off, there is the potential for nutritional imbalances. It sounds counterintuitive, maybe. But while the diet encourages a wide array of healthy foods, if someone gets too restrictive, say, heavily limiting red meat or certain carbs without finding good substitutes, it could lead to deficiencies. For example, significantly limiting red meat without care could lower your intake of iron and vitamin B12. Both are critical for energy for red blood cells. So it really requires some careful planning to make sure you're getting all your essential nutrients, maybe from diverse plant sources or considering supplements if needed.
That makes sense. It's not just about taking things out, but also ensuring you adequately replace anything vital you might lose. What about the practical stuff, like cost? That can be a real barrier for a lot of people.
That's a very significant point, cost and accessibility. The emphasis often put on fresh, high-quality foods. You hear about organic produce, wild-caught fish. That stuff can undeniably be expensive. For people on limited budgets, or maybe living in areas without easy access to good fresh food markets, sticking to this diet can be genuinely challenging. Now, canned or frozen options can definitely help bridge that gap. Nutritionally, they're often great, but they're not always perceived the same way or might not fit everyone's preferences. It's a real practical hurdle.
Yeah, I can see that. And in our busy lives, time is always a factor, isn't it? Eating this way sounds like it might take a bit more effort in the kitchen.
Indeed. Time and preparation are definite barriers for many. Let's be realistic. Preparing whole, unprocessed foods, mostly from scratch, that requires dedicated time and effort for meal planning, shopping, cooking. For someone new to this style of eating or someone who already has a packed schedule, that transition can feel pretty overwhelming. It requires a commitment to, spending more time preparing food.
I can definitely see how that could be tough to manage consistently. Are there any maybe psychological risks, like becoming too rigid and trying to be healthy?
Yes, that's another important point. There's a potential for over-restriction. And it's kind of the paradox of healthy eating sometimes, right? Trying too hard can lead to unhealthy psychological rigidity. Some individuals might interpret the guidelines really strictly, maybe cutting out entire food groups unnecessarily, even healthy ones they enjoy. And this could, in some cases, inadvertently lead towards disordered eating patterns or even social isolation if dining out or eating with friends becomes stressful. The real insight here, I think, is finding balance, not aiming for some kind of impossible perfection or binary elimination.
That's a really important nuance, balance, not perfection. What about the claims for specific health conditions? Are there times when the benefits might be, oversold a bit?
That's fair. While it's promising for general health in certain conditions, the evidence for specific complex conditions, like some autoimmune diseases, is often still emerging and quite nuanced. Some claims you might hear floating around, particularly about curing complex chronic conditions, can definitely be overstated. That can lead to unrealistic expectations for people who are really searching for answers. It's important to manage those expectations and see this diet as part of a broader health strategy, not usually a magic bullet on its own.
Right. Managing expectations is key. And finally, we're all individuals, aren't we? Does everyone react the same way to this diet,
Yeah.
or is there variability?
No, absolutely. Not everyone reacts the same, and that's the last key point. Individual variability. People respond differently. Genetic factors play a role, existing health conditions, specific food sensitivities or allergies. All these can affect how well the diet works for someone or require significant modifications. For example, some people are just really sensitive to high-fiber foods. They might experience digestive discomfort initially, even though fiber is generally beneficial. It truly highlights why personalization is so important when it comes to nutrition.
So, understanding yourself, your own body, is really key here. Okay, given all these considerations, both the pros and the cons, for listeners who are intrigued by this and maybe want to try adopting this diet, what are some actionable steps? How can they make it work for them?
Right. Well, adopting the anti-inflammatory diet successfully, it really does require some planning and thoughtful integration into your life. My number one suggestion, honestly, it's probably to consult with a registered dietitian if you can. They can really help tailor the diet to your specific individual needs, make sure you're maintaining nutritional balance, avoiding those potential deficiencies we talked about, especially important if you have any underlying health conditions.
That's solid advice. Start with a pro, if possible. And then, how do you actually begin? Do you dive in head first, or is it better to make gradual changes? How do you make it stick in a busy life?
Gradual changes are almost always more sustainable, I find. Maybe start by just incorporating one new anti-inflammatory food into your diet each week, or focus on swapping out one processed snack for a whole food alternative. That approach makes the transition feel less drastic, more manageable. For busy lives, meal prep can be a lifesaver. Maybe dedicate one day, or even just a few hours on the weekend, to chop vegetables, cook a batch of quinoa or brown rice. It makes weeknights so much easier. And when eating out, look for grilled options, veggie-heavy dishes. Ask for dressings on the side. It's about making smarter choices within your reality, not becoming a hermit.
Okay, smart choices, not social isolation. Love that. And for those worried about the cost, are there genuinely budget-conscious ways to do this that still deliver the benefits?
Well, absolutely. You don't have to feel pressured to buy everything organic or wild-caught if that doesn't fit your budget. It's just not realistic for many. Frozen fruits and vegetables, for instance, often just as nutritious as fresh, sometimes even more so because they're picked at peak ripeness, and they're significantly more affordable. Buying whole grains like oats or brown rice in bulk can also save a lot of money, and they last ages. What's fascinating here is that even with these potential challenges, like cost or time, this diet really can remain a flexible and sustainable option if you approach it thoughtfully. There are tons of fantastic online resources, blogs, cookbooks now dedicated to anti-inflammatory eating on a budget. They offer creative, simple recipes that won't break the bank. And just staying informed about proper portion sizes and varying your food choices helps prevent monotony and ensures you cover your nutritional bases.
Okay, so it sounds adaptable. So, what does all this mean for you listening right now? The anti-inflammatory diet, it really offers this science-backed, sustainable approach to potentially improving your health by actively reducing chronic inflammation in your body. We've explored its interesting origins with Dr. Andrew Weil, how it blends modern science with that older traditional wisdom. We dove into the core principles, emphasizing those whole, nutrient-rich foods while dialing back on the inflammatory triggers. And we uncovered a ton of potential benefits, reducing disease risk, boosting cognitive and gut health, maybe helping with weight, energy, mood. But we also looked honestly at the necessary considerations, things like cost, time, and making sure you don't accidentally create nutrient gaps. It really feels like a testament to how traditional ways of eating and modern science can merge for, hopefully, long-term wellness. Now, if you found this deep dive as fascinating and informative as we did, just imagine what else you could learn that could truly expand your understanding of health and well-being. For more incredible insights and deep dives into complex topics just like this one, please make sure you visit Mind Expansion Daily. They are a fantastic resource for getting great information. And while you're there, please do like and subscribe to Mind Expansion Daily for more insights.
And maybe this leaves you with an important question to ponder. How might understanding your own body's inflammatory responses a bit better, and then making perhaps just small, thoughtful dietary adjustments? How might that empower you to take charge of your health in ways that are unexpected, maybe even profound? But as always, we definitely advise consulting with your healthcare professionals first, just to make sure any significant dietary changes align with your specific needs, your health status, and your lifestyle. That has maximized the potential benefits while minimizing any risks.